Welcome, everybody. This is Bob Perry, the trucker trainer, and your host for the Fit Driver Podcast. I'm happy today to introduce our first guest on our podcast, Rodolfo Giacoman. Rodolfo holds a position as Fatigue Management Specialist for Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance. Welcome, everybody. Rodolfo Giacoman.
Thank you very much, Bob. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me, and thank you for your role in highway safety. We really appreciate it here at the Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance.
Thank you for joining me today. I really appreciate it. And I want to say, when I was looking through your bio, we have a common thread there. We both come from a family of professional drivers, right? And what I really enjoyed reading about yours is that you had a towing business. Is that correct?
Our family had a trucking business.
Right.
So I grew up doing pre-trip inspections and maintenance on the trucks. And then one of my brothers set up a body shop. And as part of the body shop, he had a towing truck. And when he just started, I was the driver of the towing truck. That was my first paying job.
Right on. Yeah. Well, I grew up in a large family of kids, and we were the pre-maintenance crew, right? And it wasn't paying. Of course, it was
exactly.
Part of it. As you know, the idea of our podcasts and Fit Drivers is we're trying to make the correlation and really get out there. The value of drivers, and of course, what you're doing in driver fatigue certainly relates to what I'm trying to emphasize on is fitness of the driver, right? Are they fit to drive? And how can we help these professional drivers out there today stay fit and be able to protect their livelihoods, right? So
that's right.
I know that there's a lot of responsibility that for the drivers and how they maintain that. So can you tell me about driver fatigue and how CVSA interacts with the carriers and helps bring this to the forefront and support highway safety?
Here at the Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance, we're an organization that represents not only the law enforcement community. We have members across Mexico, the United States, and Canada that enforce commercial vehicle and drivers among our highways. But we also have industry as a crucial part of that membership. As a matter of fact, industry is what started the alliance, the Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance. So we work very well together, both the enforcement side and the industry side. And at CVSA, we have several programs. The premier program is the inspection program, but we have multiple programs, and folks can look them up at our website at cvsa.org. One of those programs that I'm responsible for is the North American Fatigue Management Program. And as you mentioned, that's a program to help drivers manage their fatigue and also motor carriers. We call it the NAFMP for the North American Fatigue Management Program. The NAFMP does not place the entire burden of managing fatigue on the driver. It recognizes that the motor carrier has a lot of involvement in managing that fatigue. So the program has 10 different courses that are available online for free. Folks can look them up on our website at cvsa.org on their programs. They'll find the NAFMP there, or they can also go directly to nafmp.org to get access to these free courses. Drivers can take Module 3, which is the driver education and training, and it's a completely free and voluntary program. Not only has the program the education components, which are important for drivers to learn as far as the knowledge is concerned, and the skills that they need to do that management of their fatigue while they're doing their job, so that they can change the attitudes, knowledge, skills, and the attitudes so that the behavior changes for managing their fatigue. And that's the core component of the driver. But also, the program has a guide for motor carriers to implement a fatigue risk management system that has different controls in the organization that involves the dispatchers, the driver trainers, and most importantly, top management and the managers, because one of the key components, the whole system doesn't work, is the safety culture of the organization. Part of that safety culture is getting top management to buy into the fatigue management program and permeate that through the whole organization so that the shared values of the organization are in line in trying to change change that behavior to manage fatigue. And you're correct that there's a lot of similarities between your program and your services and the management of fatigue, because the NAFMP in the education component for the driver, it establishes, as you already said, the clear link between well-being, your fitness, and managing fatigue and being able to be alert at the wheel. The NAFMP proposes that there are 5 keys to wellness: positive behaviors, mindfulness, positive relationships, as well as the well-known issues of nutrition and exercise. And last but not least, your sleep hygiene, which is a very important factor for drivers to be alert at the wheel.
You mentioned something earlier I wanted to tab before I forget. You talk about getting the buy-in from the upper management and getting their support. Do you ever find that to be a struggle? Or are people really pretty much all on the same page and recognize that this is a very important issue? I mean, I know we have all this technology today, right, that they invest in to, keep that big piece of equipment down between the white lines. But it seems like when it comes to really investing in the driver, the most important asset, there's not much time invested in that. So been my experience. Not everybody, but certainly a large percentage. So I'm interested to hear from you if everybody really is on the same page.
Well, you're absolutely right, Bob. It is a struggle because a lot of companies think that, you get the technology, you get some cameras installed in the truck, and voila, that's going to manage fatigue. It's not. There are studies that show that if you implement a fatigue risk management system without a safety culture, it's not going to work. And the culture starts at the top. There was a National Transportation Safety Board investigation of a crash in Phoenix a couple of years ago, and they just released the results of their investigation earlier this year.
Read that.
Yeah. And it showed that the driver was perfectly qualified, had no prior convictions or crashes. He was properly licensed. The post-crash showed no indication. All the testing showed no negative results for either alcohol or other drugs. The driver was perfect, except he had not been given enough opportunity to sleep. The day of the crash had an opportunity to sleep of about 5 hours. Opportunity, that doesn't mean that he actually slept that much. And so the NTSB, the National Transportation Safety Board, found that fatigue was likely the cause of the crash. And they found the company, they did not have a sufficient safety culture to support fatigue management. They did not have a fatigue management program. So they found they should have had a fatigue management program to prevent this crash. And they found that they had a policy for hours of service. They had a policy for the monitoring technologies on the truck, but they were not enforcing it because they found out that there were previous violations that were not acted upon. So you're absolutely right. Having that safety culture in the organization and the top buy-in from management is crucial, not only for having the support and the systems, but also the culture that a driver that is tired, that is not fully alert, has enough support from his managers and his coworkers or her coworkers to speak up and say, I can't do it. I need to take a break. I'm not able to take this load. Let's do something about it. And knowing that she or he will be supported with that decision.
Well, and that's a very valid point. One of the things that I know that I've read a lot about is like the CDC. They talk about being a professional long-haul driver, and it's one of the most unhealthiest professions you can get involved in, right? And so because of what you just said, the nature of the job, this lack of sleep, the food, all those things, right? And so, as you know, in my experience, I do a lot of comparison with drivers. Professional drivers are like professional athletes of their business, right? And so we've seen the football change the protocols for concussions, right? They've realized that could be very dangerous. So when you are involved in an industry that is an environment that can be detrimental to your health, so many times it's just not the individual, but it's the company's responsibility to save those individuals from themselves, right? Athletes want to play, drivers want to drive. That's how they make their living and provide for their family. But sometimes you got to protect them from themselves.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. we all suffer from fatigue and need to stay alert, but driving a commercial vehicle places additional stress on anybody, just as you said, because of the nature of the profession. There's limited opportunities to exercise. You don't always find the best options for food on the road. You got to be very picky and have some strategies to eat nutritiously while on the road. You're not sleeping at home in your home environment, so that makes it difficult, and there's a lot of disturbances. So you're not going to have the best sleep, just like when all of us travel and experience an uncomfortable sleeping environment. Changing time zones, the stress of being on a cabin with the vibration, the noise, dealing with traffic, dealing with the demands. They seem to be always in a rush if they're not giving sufficient time to take the load from point A to point B. And the stress of being alone all the time. You're not with family, you're not with friends, you're not with close to coworkers. And the longest study done on longevity and well-being by Harvard, over 80 years following the same set of individuals, found that the single most important factor for longevity and well-being is not blood pressure, is not exercise or nutrition, is close relationship, is the warmth of your relationships. And so they found that having a warm relationship is a stress regulator, and that's so important, as you well know, to keeping our health. So you're right on, Bob. Absolutely.
Well, thank you. That's one of the things I always try to emphasize, that, that drivers should take a pet with them, right? I mean, to have a companion, right? And get out and walk the dog. I mean, it's like, we know all the time that when you take your dog to the vet and the dog is overweight, what's the vet tell you? You need to cut back on her food and walk them more, right? So it works for the dogs. Why can't it work for us? And also companionship, right? It makes you feel better and so forth. But you're right. And I get it. I come from a family of professional drivers. Everybody in our family, everybody drove. And when you grew up, you expect to be a truck driver. I tried it. And for whatever reason, that skill set flew right over me, but I recognized it, right? And I understood that I just wasn't for me. And I can never forget the day I come home and told my dad, this is just not for me. And he goes, okay, well, we found out what you don't want to do. Now we're going to find what you do want to do, because you got to get a job. So, and I think he was just as relieved as I was, because he could tell that was not my skill set. Yeah, it's one of the things that I'm very thankful for people like you, what you do. And I'm trying to bring more to awareness that the way we recruit and bring on people so many times is that they need an opportunity, right? And they don't really realize what they're getting into.
Yeah.
And you get out there, and that's the reason why the turnover is so high, right? Going down a snowbank mountain in Denver, and it's fishtail, and like, hey man, I didn't sign up for this.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you how many times I've been sitting in a safety director's office, and they get a call from the driver, a new driver, and they're saying, you listen, I'm done. I don't want to do this. And they say, no problem. Come on back in. We'll get your process, get your check. And you go, no, you don't understand. The truck is at the Motel 6. I've got a Greyhound ticket. I'm going home, right? I mean, because they're scared or just not for them.
Yeah, that's a real issue for the motor carrier industry, and that's what the NAFMP strives to promote with motor carriers. If you don't have a fatigue management program, you're losing money, even though it takes time and investment to implement a fatigue management program in the organization. It saves money.
So, Rodolfo, you mentioned about the return on investment, and one of the things that I know people don't recognize is that when they do lose that driver, when they bring on the new driver, there's a period of time, right, for them to get up to speed, to understand the lane, the customer, and all that. And you lose profitability, right? It's going to take a while for that person to get up. That's why what you're talking about, what you do and what I do, is trying to realize that the stats speak for themselves. And the numbers from the FMCSA, over 55% of our drivers out there today operate on a 1-year card or less. And you lose those men and women out there and those drivers that, it's just not that easy to replace. We think they are, but they're not.
Yeah. And helping your drivers with their well-being, helping them if they have a sleep disorder. The benefits of implementing such a program will include not only retention, you're saving on all those crashes that you're not having, because that saves a lot of money. It avoids the exposure to legal liability. It makes your workforce much more alert, more productive, happier. And it retains your workers. You're absolutely right.
Well, yeah, and there's a lot of talk about the driver shortage. It's really about the driver retention. You're certainly right that we have the drivers, and as I've been posting a lot about, is retention takes attention.
Exactly right.
So you have to really spend the time and help the drivers and educate, because it's part of our responsibility. So a couple other questions I want to ask you before we go, and this may be a little bit out of your wheelhouse, but maybe you can talk to it. So for example, we talk about the pre-trip check, right? That's always a big valid safety training point. And one of the things when I'm talking to orientations, classes, and so forth around the country, I talk about the pre-trip check, how important it is, because I know as a kid, I was beat into our brains, and whenever time my dad would come home, nothing happened until we walked around that trailer truck and checked all the lights, anything hanging down, all those things, right?
Yep.
But what I try to emphasize is just take one more step and do a pre-trip fridge check, because in the day in life, professional driver, you're going to get stuck. Traffic, weather, as you know, all those things. And as I say, if you don't have a good choice to reach for, they generally make a bad choice. So any comments on that? I realize that may be a little bit, it's kind of next to your neighborhood of what you work on, fatigue, but really hoping that we can get that adopted as part of the standard of training drivers when we're bringing them on into this industry.
Absolutely, Bob. And the NAFMP says managing fatigue and getting your 5 keys to wellness, getting your sufficient sleep hygiene, sleeping enough and with high quality, getting your nutrition, just like you say on your pre-fridge check, getting your exercise, having that positive behaviors and positive relationships, those 5 keys to wellness should not be only a priority. And the NAFMP makes this distinction between what a priority is and what a value is. And it says a priority is like when you prioritize exercising every day and eating a healthy breakfast. But if you're a driver and one day you wake up and you want to avoid the rush hour in an urban area, you probably want to get up early and you go out there and drive a little earlier, and you may skip the breakfast and you may skip the exercise. And that's fine, right? That's a priority, but you didn't get to it that particular day. But one thing that the driver won't do is go out on his or her truck naked. Why? Because dressing is not a priority, it's a value. It's ingrained in the culture. Just like you don't go out naked on your truck, you shouldn't go out with those 5 keys to wellness. You should go with enough sleep. You should not go without your proper nutrition, without your exercise, without your positive behaviors and the positive relationships. So the NAFMP tries to ingrain in motor carrier companies that fatigue management should not be only a priority, but a value. Unfortunately, it's not as regulated as the pre-trip inspection. The pre-trip inspection is federally mandated. The fatigue management program is not regulated. The only regulation is one of the factors of fatigue, which is the time on task. And there's multiple factors of fatigue. There's internal factors for each driver, their health, their habits, their genetics, their fitness level, the hours of sleep in the previous night and the previous week. All these internal factors affect their fatigue, but there's also external factors, the complexity or the monotony of the task, the environmental factors, the stress of the cabin, the weather conditions, the traffic, etc. Fatigue is not just an on and off switch, whether you're alert or asleep. There's a spectrum of alertness. And if you're not fully alert, you could be with your eyes wide open, but if your alertness is diminished, you can be driving and you miss the exit, and sometimes you even miss something on the road and you can have a fatal crash. So we need to train our drivers to recognize objective signs of fatigue so that they can recognize when they need to stop and take a break, take a nap, which are the best countermeasures to the last level of fatigue on the road, if not implementing all these 5 keys to wellness that will prevent them from having such an episode on the road.
Every time I read about how these companies have been awarded for, on-time delivery, right? 100% of the time. And drivers are rewarded for that, right? And I'm pushing, let's reward drivers for passing their DOT and getting a 2-year card. They get a 2-year card. That means they're at the top of the line of, in good health. And I know early on in my coaching career, when it got to where I had to have a coaching team, I asked them to monitor, and at the end of their session, ask the drivers, what are the top 3 things that really wind their watch the wrong way? And number one is they get in a fight with their dispatcher. They get upset. Number two, they get the distress call from home. Johnny got kicked out of school. The basement's flooded. I need $200 now or whatever, right? And number three, they get cut off by a four-wheeler. And you're right, those frustrations come into play. And when you're driving that piece of equipment down the road, you've got to have full concentration and focus, is really the key to that.
Yep. So. And you talk about the, being rewarded and the compensation. They are compensated by the mile, right? Not by the hour.
Right.
And so that whole structure places a burden and a stress on making sure they get there on time. The NEFMP, as I said earlier, doesn't place the entire burden on the driver. It puts it on the dispatchers, it puts it on the company, and also has a training module for shippers, receivers, and brokers, because it's so important that when the shippers and receivers recognize that the driver is operating on such a limited time, that they need to be provided with the facilities to rest if they're asked to wait, that they don't have them just in line waiting for the queue to move, that they allow them to park overnight if they're not able to load them up, so that they can have a safe place to park their truck and rest. And so there's that component for all the different parties involved that affect the environment of a driver's fatigue management. It's not only the driver that has to deal with that, but the motor carrier and all the partners.
So I have two brothers that still drive today, and we talk about this, and they say they never park on those off and on ramps. And why? Because people coming on and off at night, if they're fatigued, sleepy, and they see the lights, they follow the lights, and they don't realize they're parked. Seen some horrific accidents that way. So,
yep.
Well, listen, I certainly appreciate you spending time with me today. This is very enlightening, and I really would like to have you come back sometime as we work hard to bring this to the surface. This is what we hope to do, to explain more about this and just keep driving it forward and get more of the people understanding the value proposition, like you talked about what I do, what you do, the fatigue. It's real. And it's what I say a lot of times, it's about vision, and sometimes it's a lack of vision to do things differently, and hopefully we can change that. But much like my sponsor, which I'm so excited to have, Prepass, that's what they're about as well, trying to be drivers' health, safety, conscious on the road. So I really appreciate their support in making this happen. So thank you, my friend, and I look forward to speaking to you again, and I'm looking forward to coming to your event next year.
Delighted to do it, Bob. Thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for what you do to help our drivers and the entire industry be safer. We really appreciate your efforts, and thank you for this invitation. We'll be delighted to come back anytime. Thank you very much.